What's up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here, and today we're going to talk about what is more important to learn, the backhand turnover or the forehand. But before we dive in, we have to ask the most important question of the day: who to say hi to, especially with these frisbees. How you doing today, Garrett? You having a good one?
So catch me if I fall.
Now, if you've clicked on this video, you either have one of probably three situations, because I don't really know where people would find themselves in not part of these three. Camp number one is that you are a forehand dominant player, and so you've always asked yourself, why should I learn the backhand turnover? Because I have a forehand that just does those shots. Camp two, you are a person that is backhand dominant and you don't have that forehand, and you've learned and worked your game in a way that you can get the backhand turnover to go that way. I think this is probably more common for folks than camp one, who are forehand dominant players. And then camp three, obviously our core audience, you guys are masters of both, and you were just like, hey, there's that silly Mr. YouTube guy. Why don't I go watch his video? And shucks, guys, that's so nice of you. Now, when learning these shots, it is important to understand that for a right-handed player, what we're really talking about is a shot shape that moves to the right. So on a forehand for a right-handed player, traditionally the way that we're imparting spin on the disc makes the disc want to go out straight and then fall off to the right. Obviously for our left-handed folks, because left-handed people are the only ones in their right minds, this is going to be flipped, and it's going to be the opposite. For a left-handed forehand, it's going to make it go to the left, which is more traditional backhand line for the righties. When choosing your shot to go that way, we also have to understand that there are pros and cons to sort of both the backhand turnover shot as well as the forehand shot, because while both at their surface can move in that direction, we've got a short checklist that we want to go through in terms of when we should use one over the other. But I want to go ahead and dive into the main point of this. Should you learn one over the other? Well, I think that if you are predominantly a backhand player, which is what I'm going to assume most people are in this situation, then I think learning the backhand turnover will require a little less time than learning the entire new forehand. And it was Josh from Overthrow actually who talked about this, that he really struggles when he's working with students to want to break all aspects of their game. It gets tough to work with someone on their putting as well as their backhand, and then also try to teach them a forehand at the same time, because then you just really have nothing you're leaning on, which is going to make this hobby of yours really frustrating, because you're just going to go out to the course and have no idea what you're doing trying to score. So let's swallow the big frog first. Let's talk about learning forehand and why you would want to choose learning the forehand. I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Hooligan Discs. Garrett's running an incredible operation over in Tejas, and he has a variety of molds, and Hooligans had a bit of a journey in their disc golf world, but there are a couple molds that I really love and lean on and have seen. I think for people who want a destroyer type vibe, but a way more fun name, definitely check out the Yeet. The Yeet is awesome. You're gonna see it predominantly on some forehands today, because while it flies really great on a backhand, I feel like I'm able to yeet this thing way better on a forehand. Probably the most popular mold that you've seen people really lean into, especially if you're a fan of foundation, is the Cash. Trevor obviously putting his namesake on the Cash, and it is an overstable putt and approach disc that really has some solid fade to it. I think people expect this to be like a super straight flyer, and I'm sure if you have high arm speed it is, but for most people it's just going to be an overstable, not as overstable as a zone. Imagine a zone that you could throw a little farther. I think that's where the Cash really shines, and probably the most fun to throw is the flip. Now I have to be honest, my heart broke a little bit because my Hooligan or my Funzie flip, I don't know where it is. Like, I know I own it. I love the flip so much. I actually own, I think, 4 at this point. The flip is everything. When you think about the fun of a rollover, you think of the fun of a paradox in terms of its ability to stand up and turn. Imagine if you could do that reliably while still being able to throw like really solid disc golf shots with it. I think that's where the flip really shines, because you can throw this on some hyzer and watch it stand up and turn. It's going to be a disc that makes learning a backhand turnover super easy. In fact, I would argue that this is probably one one of the best discs out there for learning the backhand turnover. Trying to learn the forehand, why would I want to lean into learning the forehand? Well, one of the biggest strengths that people focus on when it comes to learning a forehand is gap hitting. Because if I'm throwing the forehand, I am looking at my target the entire time. I'm coming through and boom. I never have to take my eyes off of the target in order to do that. Now, unless I'm throwing a backhand upshot, and even then, my head is going to turn slightly unless it's just that flick of the wrist, super straight option. Having this forehand where I can lock in. I know plenty of folks, even top players in the world like Sullivan Tipton, who I think probably finished in top 15 or something this year on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. He has a really good backhand, but his forehand is elite. And if he's hitting a gap, he'll tell you he feels way more comfortable putting a disc in his hand and throwing on a forehand. So in terms of gap hitting, if you have a shot that needs to go off in the direction of that we're talking about, that becomes a really useful option. Now, another reason that I think learning the forehand can be really helpful is because if you're learning the forehand and you have the right discs in your hand, the yeet is going to be on what I would say the more neutral side for this, because I wouldn't describe the yeet as super overstable, as in that it's just crazy beefy. So if I'm trying to throw forehand flexes, which is traditionally it's want to go to the right for a right-handed player, but if I put it on Anheuser, that's going to pull it, making it want to go to the left. This internal battle is going to cause it to fly straighter and farther. This is not a disc that I can sort of put on extreme Anheuser angle with that outside edge up, because it's not going to have the overstability in order to get back over there. It's not going to have that grit, got that dog in it, you know what I'm saying? It's not going, get me to the right. So it would be much more in the neutral category, obviously. The Vibe is another one that you can throw on hyzer, and you can watch as you throw it on hyzer with that outside edge down, it's going to stand up and it's going to fly really straight. The reason that I don't have a Vibe in this video is because every time that I meet someone who like needs that shot, my Vibes always just end up giving away to others because it's going to be a perfect disc for them. If I wanted to have a little bit of flexibility, I think it's easier to even get a very straight shot out of. I want you to learn how to throw forehands on the hyzer. I have plenty of videos here on the channel that you can check out learning the forehand. But the reason I teach this is because if you can throw a disc like this on forehand, you can throw any disc in disc golf on a forehand. For instance, the flip, which is super understable, I can throw on a forehand and get a super straight flight out of it because I just throw it on hyzer and watch it stand up to flat and then turn over, right? Whereas if I take the cash and I try to throw it on that same angle, it's overstable. So it's gonna stand up a little bit, but it's gonna crash off to the right. And the nice thing is you can take something like the yeet on a little bit of Anheuser. That's a lot of Anheuser, but you can see that it fights out midway through the flight and then starts making its way back right, which if you took that tunnel and really put like a 20-foot fairway right to left, it didn't really ever move more than 20 feet to the left, and then it didn't come back 20 feet to the right. So a nice straight tunnel shot, that's a great option in order to keep your eye on the gap and have an easier time hitting that gap. An obvious con of learning the forehand versus mastering the backhand turnover is going to be that it's going to take some time. It's an entirely different shot. So if you are someone throwing a backhand 300 and 350 feet consistently, and you've not thrown forehands comfortably, you shouldn't expect that you're going to wake up tomorrow and start throwing forehands 300 to 350 feet. It's going to take some time to develop that skill. But I think if we're learning this, this is easily something that you're not trying to take out on the distance course anytime soon. And if you embrace that sort of mentality, I think it's gonna go a long way for you. I would say the other con of going for the forehand as well is that when done improperly, if people aren't stretching, or if you just get out there and try to mash the disc as soon as possible, it can often, we're seeing in disc golf that the forehand is leading to more disc golf injuries than the backhand. So you just want to be careful and make sure you're doing stretches and of course the sorts, so that way you're not overexerting the elbow, getting tennis elbow, and then ruining the sport for yourself. Now let's talk backhand turnover, because the backhand turnover is a shot that, like I said, if you already know how to throw a backhand, the backhand turnover can be a really easy next step, because all we're simply trying to do is we're trying to change our release angle or change the type of disc that we're throwing. When I say natural release angle, for most people, there's going to be some variance of either you like to throw with the outside edge of the disc down, which would be a natural hyzer release angle, or you like to release the disc a little bit of anhyzer. Usually that comes from sort of slamming into the shot, coming over top and trying to yam into it. This works really well for some of the best players in the world. Gannon Buhr, the #1 player in the world, loves a natural anhyzer release angle. But there are players who also prefer to have much more of a stock sort of hyzer angle, like a Paul Macbeth, who prefers to have the disc just a little bit of hyzer. And then there are the wild folks out in the world like Calvin Heimberg, who are just slapping the disc perfectly flat most of the time, trying to get that angle. But most normal average disc golfers are not going to have that flat release that we're looking for every single time. So understanding I prefer to have the disc on a little bit more hyzer, or I prefer to have the disc on anhyzer, is going to influence what types of discs we should use for this backhand turnover shot. In fact, as someone who really struggles with this angle, I would argue that most people who struggle to learn this shot are because we're using the wrong type of disc to do it. It's the same thing when I watch people step up and they're throwing forehands and they're throwing that flex or that turnover shot. Most often people like to lean into something really, really overstable because they know that they're not going to burn it over. But that causes them to throw it so much harder than they need to, whereas going with something a little more understable can cause you to have that ease without having to force into it. And anytime we're trying to force into a shot, we bring more variables into play than we need. So that's why I really love a disc like the Flip, because if I throw the disc flat, it's going to turn for me naturally to have this turnover, but it's an incredibly, for lack of a better word, flippy disc. So if I really want to get some flight out of it, then I need to make sure this works really well for me on a backhand turnover, because my natural release angle is hyzer, which means that I'm making the disc already spin because I'm throwing a backhand in a way that makes it want to go left for a right-handed player. And when I put it on hyzer, that makes it want to go even more left. But the disc naturally, no matter how I spin it, if I wasn't spinning it right, it would want to go to the right. Now, one of the things about backhand turnovers is traditionally they work really well when you're able to give them height. You're able to give them time. Because if you're throwing, you can throw backhand turnovers with an overstable disc, like the Cash, for instance. If I give it enough anhyzer and I give it enough height, it's going to move to the right, hopefully, the entire time. I didn't give it enough anhyzer, and I didn't give it enough height. This is why you can see which side of the coin I landed on. It took me, I probably played disc golf for 9 years. Yeah, about 9 years before I was willing to even put any effort into learning the backhand turnover. Because I came from Ultimate and I had a forehand, I had a flick already. And when I stopped playing competitive Ultimate and just let myself learn how to flick a disc golf disc, I never saw the purpose for this shot. But as we're gonna close out the video, there is the checklist that you look at, and the forehand's not always the right answer. So let's see, if I couldn't get the putter to turn over, can I do it with the driver? We have a right to left wind, so if you have to get over on it pretty heavily, because as soon as that gets over, it's just gonna get carried to the right, which is important to remember. Yep, nope, and then there's that edge exposed, so it's gonna go hard left. Let's try to showcase and see if we can do it, because we put ourselves up on a ledge to get ourselves the height. Let's see if we can showcase that I threw both of those poorly, but how well the Flip helps in just showcasing these lines. And you can see that it even started on hyzer, which for the other two discs, when the hyzer showed, when that bottom of the flight plate showed, it got pushed hard to the left, which caused neither of those to turn out. And the Flip said, "Don't worry, Mr. YouTube man. You may be terrible at this angle, but I got you." Which takes us to the cons of the backhand turnover. I think it's important that we kind of talked about them there. I feel like on a backhand turnover, because you're naturally spinning the disc to go one way, your error, you're forcing against the natural spin of the disc, unlike a forehand where it's going where you want it to go. So when you throw a forehand poorly, often it's still going to land moving in the direction you want because you naturally spun it that way. However, if you're throwing the backhand turnover and you throw it poorly, like let's say all of this was OB to the left over here, I have 2 of those 3 shots would have been OB because I needed the disc to go right and I threw it poorly, but I spun the disc, I threw a backhand, which is gonna force it naturally to move to the left. The other thing about backhand turnovers is that, like we said, often they're gonna need some air time if you want extreme turnover. So if you're in a place where it's low ceiling, throwing the backhand turnover can feel really troublesome. If you throw too flippy, it's gonna get to the ground too fast and not have the time to get over in the air and keep moving in that left to right manner. There are perks. Obviously, for my personal game, I lean towards one, but I want to talk about the checklist because I think the checklist is really important for helping you understand when you just throw one or the other. Checklist number one, where is the danger on the hole? If the danger is sort of where a backhand is naturally pushing you towards, then I think it is often not a terrible idea to lean on the forehand for exactly the use cases that we talked about there. If I can avoid and have my throw sort of be pushing away from OB the entire time, that always feels like a much safer and better shot to score, because while I don't want to walk in with the mentality that I'm going to throw poorly, I have to understand that I'm not a robot. So sometimes I will throw poorly. Question number two is, how does the hole finish? How or where is the shot going to finish? Because I think this is the most intriguing part about comparing the two in terms of if you have both, which one should you use on a certain hole? And we have to understand that when I throw a forehand as a right-handed player, it's going to be finishing to the right. It's going to push to the right. It's very hard to throw a pushing hyzer on a forehand, which means that it's moving to the right, but it also is moving forward in somewhat of an equal fashion, almost like in the diagonal. Most forehands, when they're done, are going to dump. They're going to finish. They're going to have that hard push to the right. And so if a hole starts looking like it's in this sort of movement of left to right for a right-handed player, then it can be very easy to just think, oh, throw the forehand there. But we know that if it gets a little straight towards the end of its flight, then the forehand will usually come up short because it doesn't have the pushing power, because that overstability of the spin that we're putting on it, whatever it may be, is going to cause it to die a little sooner and a little shorter. Whereas the backhand turnover, we've talked about it a million times at this point, but if you're throwing the backhand turnover, it naturally is spinning in a way that makes it want to go this way. That internal battle of putting it on a turnover line, but it's naturally spinning to go this way, is going to cause it to have that straight flight that we even saw the opposite of when we threw the forehand flex to get it to go straight. It's naturally going to have that, which is going to cause it to be able to push straighter for a little while longer. One of our local courses is called John LeMaster Civitan Park, and hole 2 is a short little, like 250-foot hole that I tried to throw a forehand on for years. And while I gave myself birdie looks pretty often, I was always on the edge of the circle or just inside the circle, really having to rely on my putt. It's because I never threw backhand turnovers at it until I played with one of our older players, Mr. Mike, and Mike told me, Robbie, why are you doing that? It's a backhand turnover all day, dude. You need to just grab a putter and throw a backhand turnover. And that's exactly what happened, is I grabbed a backhand putter and I threw it on a turnover, and I watched as it held the same line, sort of same angle that my forehand was holding as it went through the air. But whereas my forehand wanted to finish down, my backhand wanted to finish flat and sort of finished out, which caused this to land shorter and this to push straighter. You can see that how the disc is going to finish drastically impacts which one you should throw. The last I think is important is the wind, right? If I have a crosswind that's moving right to left, I understand that when the flight plate gets exposed, it's going to get carried, as we saw in those examples. And if I expose the top of the flight plate, it's going to get pushed down. But the forehand is going to push through. I can throw the forehand a little flatter, and instead of getting pushed, it can cut through. But in the same way, if I have a left to right wind, I can make sure that the dyingness of the forehand wanting to finish is going to make it push left and die shorter, faster. Whereas if I throw the backhand turnover, when it catches that bottom of the edge or that bottom of the flight plate, it's going to push it, which gives it more time to move to the right, and it still is going to have that natural fight out of it that we want it to finish with. So looking at hole 6 here at the University of Montevallo, this is one of my favorite holes on the course, but I think it demonstrates this concept really well. There is a wide open space to the left, and then the silver basket sits short, and then back in a tunnel to the right, sort of 45 degrees back and into that tunnel, 50 feet back, is the long basket. So if I'm throwing, it is really, really difficult to get a forehand all the way into that back pocket, because it would have to be a disc that's sort of flipping up, holding straight, and then dying down, but it can't die down too soon. The problem is that if it doesn't fade into that gap, I'm gonna go long into the trees straight ahead. So for the shorter side, a forehand is absolutely the right play because it's just gonna go out there, it's gonna get a big skip towards the basket, and bada boom, bada bing, our yeet rolls its way right next to the basket. However, if I was trying to throw to the long basket, it makes a lot more sense to go with something like the backhand turnover that's gonna turn into that gap. Now, I'll try this with the flip at first, just to see. And that's perfect. It carried right over the basket, right up that hill. But it's also worth noting that if you feel more comfortable and you have that natural Anheuser release angle, then what discs you're going to use for the turnover is going to be different. If Trevor was throwing this would absolutely be a cash hole for him because he would try to rock this thing on Anheuser and let the overstability fight its way out. Now, I'm not as good at Trevor as throwing these shots, but for the Maymays, we'll absolutely give it a try. You could see, I just pulled it a little inside too early. That was a for effort, but pulled it inside a little bit too early, but you could see that it moved in that left to right fashion, and then it flattened out at the very end. So, do I think that it's worth learning one over the other? The short answer is no. I think you should try to learn both of them equally. If I had to put priority on learning one over the other, I would say if you already have a good backhand, then I would start learning the forehand, because as someone who has the good forehand but didn't trust the backhand, it's still hard to this day to go back to trusting the backhand turnover ever on a shot when I could just pick up and throw the forehand anyways. These biases will form in your game over time, and the more those biases form, the harder it gets in order to overcome them. Because as I look at these two spreads, Robbie from 5 years ago would probably never have felt comfortable throwing that second shot, but the Robbie of 5 years ago couldn't score this course like he can today. Hope this video was helpful, and I hope it brought up some points for you to consider. And if I know that I don't have probably a whole video on how to throw backhand turnovers, and that's because I've got so many bad habits in doing it. I'd rather just let someone else teach that, if I'm being 100% honest. So we're all learning. We're all learning together. I know how to throw it. I just can't get the old arm to say, hey, we should do that, brother. So as always, I want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Please make it fantastic for someone else too. But for now, we're going to leave you with the birdie.